Hello, welcome to another episode of Lectures of Fallen Wisdom. Today I ask the question for you. Are you a fat, skinny kid? Are you not exactly fat, but not exactly skinny either? Do you have a layer of flab around you that you just can't get rid of? Is there like a 10-pound difference between you and your ideal you? Are you lustful? Are you bitchy? Are you an asshole to your woman? Are you an asshole to your mom? Are you annoyed a lot? Look in the mirror and ask yourself if you're fat and not know. Not know for sure. These are all the signs of being a fat, skinny kid. Fat, skinny kids aren't exactly fat. They're skinny, but they have no definition, no abs, no real definition of their muscles. Yeah, they can even get a little bulky and look muscular and athletic, but they always have this layer of fat. It's basically a layer. It's water retention. It's what gives you a fat face, even though your body is not terribly skinny. So the way to get rid of fat, skinny kid is through diet. You really just have to stay away from carbohydrates. Yeah, like all the time. And I've tried different ways of getting around this idea through intermittent fasting and through limiting maybe carbohydrates to a single day. Nothing works because consuming any kind of carbohydrate creates the addiction for the next. And you're too weak to resist in many instances. You just simply reach for the carb and shove it in your mouth before you even have a chance to make a choice. So it's impossible to regulate your diet when you're eating a lot of carbohydrates. I mean, there's going to be a point where you can't completely get rid of them. I mean, there's just going to be moments where it's going to be mixed into food or something and you kind of have to eat, so you'll eat it. But understand the addiction that's going to cause. It's going to cause you to reach for something even more carbohydrate-y in a very short amount of time. So is it worth even eating it if it's mixed in? Like if somebody gives you some stuff with rice or beans in it and you eat it, you know what's going to happen to you. It's just, you're going to fall off the wagon. It's an addiction. And this carbohydrate addiction is causing us all to retain water more than we should. We should be retaining zero water. Now, the thing about the way you have to follow a diet is basically meat, non-starchy vegetables, no fruit, no bread, no pasta, no beans, no rice, no grains. Nothing that's going to feed this addiction. Because you can't, it's like, you should only eat healthy carbohydrates. Well, the healthy carbohydrates drive you to eat the shittier ones. They do. They make you hungry for it. In your weak moments, in your tired moments, you will reach for those things. And there's a lot of anxiety that goes into your bloodstream from the fluctuating level of blood sugar. It's a huge problem. And it creates the bitchiness factor of the fat, skinny kid phenomenon, which is where you're just kind of mouth off to your woman. You know, you bicker with her. You're just a sour piece of ass. You're a sorry, sour piece of shit. Where you just like say mean things, throw out insults, and you just kind of move on. And then when they get mad, you're like, "What? I'm sorry." And you're even like indignant and you're sorry. And it's just like this whole shitty combination. Just you want to be even keel, man. And like as much as I preach that your mind should either be thinking or breathing. I mean, Your mind should be breathing or thinking. Can your mind do both? I think when it's thinking about one particular thing, it can, but when it's thinking about just everything in your life at once in this jumble in the back of your head, it cannot. So yes, that is a very crucial practice, and to understand and to be always present of mind, but your mind will wander. Your daydreams will occur. It's very hard to just stay focused and in the moment at every single moment. And the moment you drift off and get into a feeling of anxiety, usually caused by a dip in blood sugar, usually caused by your addiction to carbohydrates, you will do something that you're not proud of. And then you will have to atone for it. You will have to apologize for it. And it will become a very significant problem in your life. And it's just every day it's going to happen. And while you're tending to that problem and trying to solve it and fix it, you're going to run into 10 more because you're just not prepared to deal with the world on a carbohydrate-rich diet. So this idea of complex carbohydrates, look, it's a pipe dream, man. I mean, we weren't meant to eat these things. They've created loads and loads of malnutrition human race. We are hunter-gatherers. We're supposed to be eating the sparse kind of leavings that we find just walking around. Instead, we've cordoned off huge vats of land, and now we create this crop, and we all have way too much food. And the thing that we reach for, even though we have tons of meat there's just meat everywhere. There's vegetables everywhere. But what do we go for? Chips, cookies, cakes, coffee, all empty shit. Caffeine is another one, man. Caffeine is sugar. Okay? Don't fool yourself. And even in trace amounts of decaf coffee, it's a little bit of sugar to trigger that mechanism inside you, to trigger the desire for something more. I would even avoid sweeteners, like artificial sweeteners, including stevia and monk fruit, like these miracle sweet things, right? Well, what they do is they create a craving for sweet stuff, and that leads you back into carbs. And it's, anything that gives you comfort in the moment, like that is a food stuff, that it's comfort that it's, the only reason it's giving you comfort is because you're experiencing anxiety and you're using it to quell it. As a child, you would quell anxiety by sitting down in front of some cartoons with some cookies, and it would just kind of deaden your mind and allow you to just escape for a little while your anxiety. But then in an hour later, you'd be having anxiety because, or at least sadness or despair, because your blood sugar is low. And when your blood sugar is low, it fucks up your breathing pattern. Anxiety rises, sadness rises, depression, everything. All this ADHD stuff, it's all about fluctuating blood sugar. If they just got these kids on some straight up food, nutritious meats, nutritious vegetables that aren't full of starch. So, we're talking about eggplant. We're talking about zucchini. We're talking about squash. We're talking about dark leafy greens. And mainly you're avoiding things like carrots. You're avoiding things like fruit, bananas. You're avoiding potatoes. Yes, even the sweet potato that everyone talks about. It's just leading you down that road, like everyone's like, well, beans are the greatest thing. And I've even preached beans on this show. Well, beans are just a gateway drug into chocolate cake. They are. You have to just be so strict with it. And what will happen is you will become chiseled. You will become like the wild man in the world, like the real wild man from before. That doesn't even have to, when you look in the mirror, you're like, holy shit, like I'm ripped. There's no like, am I fat? Let me turn sideways. Wait, let me look this way. Let me look at my ass from behind. It's like If you're asking that question, you're fat, or at least you're too fat. You're retaining too much water. It should be fucking obvious when you look in the mirror that you're not. Now, some people are in complete denial. They look at themselves in the mirror all the time for so long that their image morphs, and sometimes they need to catch a look of it in a picture and get to see kind of like how fat you've become. Like, while you slept, this is what happens. Now, another thing is sleep. Sleep is so important. I was recently doing some research about it, and sleep is like more important than food. And you need to be getting at least 7 hours. I mean, I like to do things in intervals of 90 minutes. So we're talking 7.5 hours should be your sleep at least. And if you're not getting that, you're going to also retain a lot of water. But your sleeping pattern will be completely set. Everything will be fine. Everything comes into alignment with your diet. And if you just make sure you're eating very nutritious food and staying away from empty foods that are essentially mostly stuff and not nutrients, which are carbs, you'll just be so much happier, you'll be so much healthier, and you'll be so much more fit. And you'll be so much better person, and it'll be so much easier to maintain a bliss state in your mind. Now, what's the issue of meat is that there's adrenaline and anxiety in the meat that you eat because of the way it's farmed and the way that these animals are mistreated. And so there's an element of anxiety that exists in meat too. So you have to be aware of that, but it's the amount of anxiety that's in that is like nothing compared to what carbohydrates do to you with the fluctuating blood sugar. So you can handle it by apologizing to the animal, by doing a sort of a Native American prayer over the food before you eat it. You can kind of get rid of the anxiety and then take advantage of the energy so that you can work to build a better world where animals aren't treated cruelly, where there's a way of getting meat that's not killing. I mean, I'm sure they're going to invent that pretty soon. I mean, I know for a fact they will, but I don't want to let you guys know that I'm actually from the future. So I'll just say I predict that there will be a time when they will be able to create meat without suffering, making an animal suffer. And you want to help make that world? Take this energy, take this meat energy, and sublimate it. That's the real alchemy. Take this murder and turn it into something beautiful. But realize what it is. It is murder. And you're eating murder when you eat food, when you eat meat. And Native Americans understood that very well, and they apologized for that. And for them, it was a necessity. For us, it's more like, well, there's all this meat lying around. And if you don't eat it for energy, you're going to, if you don't eat it, it's just wasted energy at this point. And there's nothing you can really do. It's not like you're perpetuating it by eating it. Although, there's an argument to be made for that. But in the immediate, we know what we're doing here. We're trying to build a better universe, a better world. Now, if you can figure out a way to diet without eating meat, it's a little bit difficult. You can easily veer into the too much carbohydrates territory because it's like, what are you going to eat? Tofu all day? What do you do for protein? You can't eat nuts. Nuts are a slippery slope because they're part protein, part carbohydrate, and they're a slippery slope into more carbs. They kind of can act like the carb that they can act as your carb if that's all you eat. If you substitute everything for nuts and you kind of go to nuts will become your carb and they'll make you fat, skinny, the same. So it's like, yeah, you got to stay away from nuts, unfortunately. Nuts are beans. Nuts are beans, in effect. So you want to stay as lean as possible. You're going to have to stay on this diet. Now, you can indulge in some yogurt. plain yogurt. There's a but not milk. Milk is like is sugar, but yogurt is like bacteria has digested the milk sugar and created a foodstuff that is very beneficial for your gut lining. So yogurt is something you can eat, provided it's not sweetened. And if you want to throw some stevia on that, fine. But I recommend eating it bitter, because your mouth benefits from eating bitter things. Your whole system is much healthier on bitter, or just non-sweet, than it is on sweet. Sweet, whenever sweet touches your tongue, it sets into motion a whole bunch of metabolic processes that prepare for it. And one of them is to retain water. Even just the taste of sweet on your tongue is going to make you retain water. So why do it? Why put it there? You want to be ripped, really ripped. I mean, you want to have a 6-pack ab and like just fucking not an ounce of fat on you? Just don't eat any more carbs, man. Just stop. You'll be okay. Make sure you drink a lot of water, though, because once you stop eating carbs, your brain will like make so much less water, because it kind of relied upon carbs to like summon the water. Your brain doesn't get you thirsty. You know, most carbohydrate addicted people, they only get thirsty when they eat the carbs, but they won't drink other than that. And so when they stop eating the carbs, they don't take in enough water, and then you start to get massive muscle cramps. And that's from the lack of glycogen in your muscles, which carbohydrates supply. But water is fine. Water will lubricate that if you drink a lot of it. So you almost have to replace like how much you ate in carbs with how much you're going to drink in water. Now you do that, and you will, in about 3 to 4 days, you will be a ripped son of a bitch. That's all it takes, because it's just amazing how much water is just retaining in your system, waiting for carbs to come in. And once the body understands there's no carbs coming, it gets rid of that water, and you become a thin Superman. The Matrix. You know, it's just this little layer of fat that is irritating us, is fucking with our mental state, is making us not look as good as we should, and it's making us depressed and moody. And it's all just because we want to have that cookie, we want to have that sandwich, we want to have that bread in that moment. Why? Because we want to quell anxiety. The anxiety that's being produced by the very thing we're reaching for. It's like a junkie trying to quell anxiety, the fiendishness from the drug with the drug. And it's a cycle, and it's a terrible cycle. So this is called the Candida diet. You can kind of look it up. If you just follow the guidelines of the anti-Candida or Candida diet, and don't listen to anyone that tries to tell you can eat fruit on this diet. You cannot eat fruit. It's like everyone's like, well, fruit is so healthy, it's so great. Unless you're eating cranberries or tomatoes, you are indulging in a food that is going to swing your blood sugar, is going to have you reaching for even more sweet foods, and will change your mood in times that you don't want it. Where you won't have control over it, and you will lash out and do something stupid. I know it's counterintuitive, man. It's like this world, like they really do push fruit on us. They try to tell us that fruit is the healthiest thing. But guess what? You can get fat from fruit. I bet you no one's ever said that to you, but you can. And you are. People who, like, there's tons of fat people who that's all they eat is fruit. And they have to retain the water to get rid of the sugar and to be ready for the sugar when it comes again. So give yourself like a week of it's called the MEVE diet: meat, eggs, vegetables, yogurt. And by vegetables, we mean only really dark green stuff that's, is not going to get you fat. Anyway, peas are on the borderline, but pea protein is very beneficial. But but there's all these things now that they've created like cereals, for example, using pea protein. And the problem with that is that they're so similar to just cereal, and the act of eating it as cereal, it's too tempting. It's like having sex with, a mannequin, and there's like a whore right next to it, like a real whore, and you're just like, oh, it's too tempting. So I don't recommend going for the pea protein. They're trying to now like put it in all kinds of things, and they're creating these candy bars with them, and creating cereals, and it's I don't know. I mean, I think it's a trap, but we're not all in control of everything, and you're going to have your moments, you're going to have your cheating, but understand that it has to be 100%. Otherwise, you're just one cheat breeds the next cheat, breeds the next cheat. And no, you can't have a day of just like going crazy. Everything still stands in terms of the intermittent fast, though. You must fast intermittently in the sense that you should eat for a period of like 4 to 6 hours. You can kind of graze, but then shut off eating, wait 14 to 16 hours, and then start eating again. Give your body a chance to digest whatever it has. And if you still aren't able to get off carbohydrates, at least that cycle will keep you from retaining too much water. Although water, you will retain a certain amount. Anyway, fat skinny kid is a condition that most people get into when they're in a relationship with a woman who is very beautiful, but at the same time accepts the guy for who he is and really doesn't care. Like, she's so in love that she doesn't notice that maybe he's getting a little chubby. And she's so in love that he can get sexual gratification from her, but he doesn't have to really be sexually attractive anymore, and lulls them into like this sense of like dependence. It also, another sign of fat skinny kid is like jealousy, is you start to really see like a mismatch between you and your woman, and you start to see that, oh, someone's going to steal this woman. Those are all the paranoid thoughts of the fat skinny kid. And in the next episode, I'm going to talk about the monster boy. Yes. Who is this monster boy? Well, it's a real thing. It's a condition. And it comes after an explosion of lust with a particular woman. And you start to become completely hooked on this one woman. That's called the monster boy. But I'm going to really delve into it in the next episode, because this is one of Mike Trojan's greatest discoveries. Thanks, everyone, for listening. These are Lectures of Fallen Wisdom.